All right, let's get started. Well, greetings, everybody, and happy first week of this semester. It's the second day. I do hope that yesterday was a good first day for everybody. I am teaching my first course on campus, and I think that yesterday's class was a tremendous success. And so I look forward to seeing all my students again on Wednesday and Friday this week and going through the semester. It will be a delight, and I hope that you are finding the same to be true for the classes that you are in if you are a student. We have many students in the call today, both undergrad and grad students. We also have some staff and faculty, parents, and folks from the Penn State community at large. Really excited that the word has spread that these webinars exist and you've shown up here today. So let's start. Intros. My name is Sarah Metzger. I'm going to be your presenter today. I'm one of the assistant directors at the Penn State Sokolov-Miller Family Financial and Life Skills Center. And this office, this team, what we do is we host a bi-monthly webinar series that explores a popular money topic that folks do really seem to find timely and relevant regardless of their age and stage in life. And I think the fact that I have a pretty diverse audience tuning in this afternoon is pretty representative of that. Today, I'm going to focus on paying for college. I'm going to cover funding sources, and equally important, I'm going to cover strategies to make your education affordable. So those of you who are students, I'm talking to you. If you're a parent of a student, I'm talking to you to then talk to them. The goal is to be able to reduce the need to borrow student loans as much as possible, and that's one of the funding sources I'll discuss. So there are other top bigger, better priority funding sources to explore first, and like what are some of the practical, the insider tips, like what is it that students can do to make college more affordable when tuition and fees are set? And there are some levers to pull, which I'll discuss today. Okay. So before I do dive in though, I need to point out a couple of housekeeping items. First, this webinar is being recorded and it is going to be uploaded to our YouTube channel by the end of the week. I will reshare that YouTube channel link towards the end of the session if you missed my earlier share in the chat, so just hang tight on that. The second thing I'd like to point out is that there is a chat and anonymous Q&A Zoom feature enabled. So if this is your first time in a webinar, if you look at your little toolbar at the bottom of your screen, you're going to see chat and you're also going to see Q&A. If you'd like to ask an anonymous question, you're welcome to do so with the Q&A. Otherwise, if you ask a question in the chat, your name will show up, which I'm fine with, but some of you may not be. So utilize whichever tool seems to make the most sense for you. Send your questions as they come up. I'll try to answer them as I go, but if I don't have time, I will certainly loop back to them at the end of the session. And then finally, if you are attending today's webinar from SMEAL's Ethical Leadership Challenge, we will be sending your attendance information to the program coordinators. So all you need to do this afternoon is sit back, relax, and learn, enjoy the show, and give yourself a pat on the back for showing up today. Everybody should, honestly. You all, to me, are like amazing because you've taken time out of your day to invest in financial wellness. And that I think is amazing. I mean, I'm biased in saying that, but I do really think that that's amazing. Any type of like investment in wellness holistically is amazing. And then like you zoomed in on personal finance. Awesome. Thanks for being here. So let's get ourselves started here. I'm going to start with some facts and get to the answer of this really important question that you see on the screen. The average cost of college, if you haven't been reading the news lately or listening to podcasts, I'll give you the facts here. The average cost of college in the US has more than doubled in the 21st century, with the average in-state student paying a little over $27,000 a year to attend and live on campus at a public four-year institution in the US. So note that they are attending and living on a four-year public institution in the US. That is a lot of money. That's a lot of money for a lot of people. So this question of why should students invest in higher education is a pretty big one. Fortunately, there are many really great reasons and answers to this question. So let's take a look at the bubbles on this screen here. A college degree is going to increase your job security down the road. This is what research is telling us. Employment rates are nearly 15% higher for folks who hold 4-year degrees versus folks who just have a high school diploma. And also really exciting, college courses. So coming to college and taking courses is going to give students the opportunity to pursue their passions, their interests, take classes that they're curious about. It also gives them a chance to build a strong personal and professional network among friends, staff, faculty, and mentors. They call it Happy Valley for a reason. Everybody's really polite and helpful and supportive across all of the Penn State campuses. And with a network of alumni of, I think it's something like 780,000 members across the globe, like you've got a family and you've got a support system among other Penn Staters that have, walked where you are currently walking, kind of thing, which is amazing. And then interestingly, a college degree, and in doing research for this, it surprised me. Interestingly, a college degree even improves health outcomes for degree holders. So in this case, they are more likely to exercise on a weekly basis, less likely to smoke, more likely to hold health insurance, probably from being employed and having higher employment rates and an employer who's offering insurance coverage. And that makes it easier to get the healthcare that they need. So all really excellent reasons to invest in a higher education degree, a bachelor's degree. If I've got grad students in the call, a master's, a terminal degree, a PhD, for example, or maybe a professional degree. We might have some medical or law students in on the call as well. Okay, so here's what we've got. And depending on how you look at it, I've got all those reasons on my earlier slide. And depending on how you look at it, you might even say the biggest return on your investment in a college degree comes in the form of increased average lifetime earnings, which is what you see represented here on the screen. Report after report after report documents the differences in earnings for adults in the US with different levels of education. And you see the connection here that like the further you go in your educational journey, the more advanced of a degree you obtain for yourself, the larger your earning potential is. That is just undeniable. This comes out of some research from Georgetown out of 2021, Center on Education and the Workforce. And that's just one of many places that you can explore this data that is like really reassuring. And when we think about financial wellness, nobody in my office is going to say to you that like earning as much money as possible is the goal of financial wellness. Like that's not it. That's not what we'd say. But we do recognize that like if you're trying to strike a balance between security and freedom of choice with your finances, having a sufficient income is certainly going to make it possible for you to get your bills paid on time in a stress-free way. It's going to get you access to the resources you need for your health, for your family, for your hobbies that bring you joy and kind of check the box in that like freedom of choice category as well. That's part of personal finance. So a lot to consider here, and a lot that is kind of undeniable, and that like there is a benefit to getting a college degree. And because most of you are enrolled students anyways, like I'm probably just preaching to the choir on this, but if we do have any high school students or families of high school students, folks who are maybe thinking about returning to school or going to school later in life as an adult learner, it's important for me to like get this information across to you. Like there is a lot that like backs and makes worthwhile pursuing a higher ed, a college degree. Okay. So with that in mind, how much money are we talking about? Is the question. How much money are we talking about? How much is it of an investment? How much is it going to cost to pay for college on an annual basis? Well, you can see based on all the bubbles on my screen, hopefully it'll become clear in a minute. If it's not, it's going to depend on a number of factors. So if you are a current student or you're a family of a student, Tuition and fees are going to vary based on whether a student is in-state versus out-of-state versus international, right? Whether a student is living on campus or off campus, or if they're taking classes online. So what is their housing status? Do they have a meal plan on campus? What level, what dorm have they selected if they're living on campus? If you're living at home and not living on campus, that may be a huge cost saver. So that's going to affect the bottom line. If you are a student attending this session from one of the Commonwealth campuses versus University Park campus, there's probably a difference in tuition even for the same or similar degree, right? Major and upper division credits tend to cost more. So when you are in certain classes or you have advanced far enough along in your program, you're going to see the cost of tuition change there. Depending on what academic college you're in, that's also going to influence tuition. So there's a lot of variation here. It is safe to say that the total cost of attendance for all of you currently enrolled students in this call is going to vary. That's just facts, okay? Some part of the total cost, though, is going to be up to you to figure out. And that's what we call the non-billables. So if you've looked closely at your Lion Path account, you see your billables and your non-billables. Those non-billables are like your lifestyle costs. These are things like, if you choose to live off campus, where are you living off campus? How many roommates do you have? Are you getting your textbooks new, used, renting, no textbooks whatsoever, right? What kind of personal items do you like to buy for yourself? Subscriptions that you have, those lifestyle costs, transportation, etc. So a lot of the levers that we can pull around college costs are going to involve things external, oftentimes external from our courses, aside from like textbooks or programs that we might need to obtain in order to like do, complete a class kind of thing. The rest of it is on us to decide where do we want to live and how do we want to live our days for the 4, 5, 6, 7 years that we are in school, or beyond. My husband is a 6-year PhD student. I have lost track of how many years he spent collectively in higher education at this point. So anywho, I want to point that out. Like, how much money are we talking about? Bottom line is it's going to vary. There are these different elements that influence the cost. To make estimating your annual total cost of attendance easier, Penn State has a handy net price calculator available that's going to help you and as a student or any of your benefactors, your family, maybe your parents, grandparents, or anybody else who's helping out with your college, helping out to pay college expenses. It's going to help them estimate how much college is going to cost in the future. So those upcoming educational costs, since this calculator is based on the university's current academic year costs. I'm going to share this to you, hopefully. I'm going to like try and grab it. I saw that the QR code wasn't working on the earlier slide. I apologize for that. Let's hope that this comes through. Net price calculator. Try that out. Hopefully somebody can give me an okay in the chat to say that that link works for you. But if you've never seen this tool before, I do encourage you to play around with it because it is going to, like the formula shows on the screen, give you an estimate of what you're on the hook to pay for each year after financial aid has been applied. And you've got tuition and fees set and some of the the other billables or non-billables estimated. Okay, billables are going to be what they are. Those non-billables are going to be more of the estimate. Okay, it's, my director once said that paying for college is like shopping in a grocery store where none of the shelves and aisles are labeled with prices, and you fill up your cart and you get to the end and then everything gets scanned and you go, whoa, that's how much this costs. It's not a great way to go about paying for something, especially something that you're really excited about. It doesn't feel great. It's not easy to do. And so this net price calculator helps to demystify these annual college costs and give you a place to start, a place and a space to start planning for in terms of like, okay, how am I going to make this 4-year degree or this graduate degree as affordable as possible? And thank you to everybody in the chat that let me know that the link works. Appreciate it. Play around with it. It's actually a really cool calculator. I've seen it go through some iterations. And I love this current form of it. So moving on. Okay, now that you've got an idea or will have an idea, if you don't already, of how much it's going to cost, or you've seen your bill for this fall and you're like, okay, I know exactly how much it's going to cost. It's definitely time to think about when to start drawing from different funding sources to cover the expenses that you've identified. At the office here, we like to bucket these funding sources into 3 categories. We call them saved and earned money, free money, and borrowed money, like you see on the screen. And above each bucket on the screen, you're going to see examples of those types of funding. Now, before I dive into them a little bit deeper, it's important that I point out the ones that you see circled. So those animations just popped up. The ones that you see circled are what people, I think, generally refer to as like quote unquote financial aid. This includes federal work study, grants, scholarships, federal student loans. These are funding sources that are only going to be made available to students if that student completes on an annual basis their free application for federal student aid, also known as FAFSA. So we're going to take a closer look at that. So what is student financial aid? And I think we've got a financial aid person in the call, so feel free to like throw into the chat anything that I might be missing that you feel is pertinent. But let me give a quick breakdown of like what is financial aid and how do you get in contact with financial aid at Penn State. What I'm saying, or what I'm talking about, is the federal, state, and institutional funding that's managed and dispersed by Penn State's Office of Student Aid. So at the federal level, when we're looking at Federal Department of Ed, also known as ED, you'll probably hear ED be talked about. ED is providing more, I think something like more than $120 billion of financial aid to students each year. We're talking a lot of money, and a lot of students going to college as well, but a lot of money accessible via the Department of Education. Pennsylvania has a state grant program that is awarding eligible students with, somewhere from like several hundreds of dollars or several thousands of dollars annually, depending on need. And colleges and offices across Penn State, both here at University Park and at the Commonwealth campuses, are offering both merit and needs-based scholarships, which I'm sure, like, as I say scholarships and grants, everybody's ears start to perk up. If you know, like, that's the free money, let's talk more about that. And I will in just a moment. If you want to get connected with financial aid, we've got some of their social media and site information listed on the screen. They are a brilliant team here at UP, and I know that their counterparts across the Commonwealth are brilliant as well. They've got a lot of folks trying to talk with them. So go through the proper channels. There is a contact form on their page. If you have a question that you'd like to get answered, please put in that request to get a conversation going with the financial aid office. It's probably, well, all year round is probably busy for them, but I imagine this time especially is a really busy time of year. So if you don't hear back right away, just know that they are working to get to your question and to get, you the response and guidance that you need. Okay. But back to like, okay, grant scholarships, all the free money, all this funding you talk about, work study. I want to know more about it. How do I access it? I mentioned earlier the free application for federal student aid. That has to be complete in order to access much of this financial aid that I have mentioned. And you get to that point by visiting the studentaid.gov website. So I'm going to bring it up and I'm going to take you through some information about applying for FAFSA. And I do see a question in the chat. I'm going to come back to that in just a little bit. Okay, so hang tight. Let's move forward into this federal student aid process. Okay, applying for aid is not meant to be complicated. It certainly can feel complicated for folks and has felt complicated for some of you in the past. Hopefully it doesn't continue to feel that way, as the application process has been at least attempted to be made easier. I think it's easier based on what I've seen. But for anyone who hasn't completed FAFSA before, I do recognize it's helpful to know what to expect. So as quickly as I can, I'm going to try to run through and sum up the studentaid.gov financial aid process from start to finish. So it begins when you visit studentaid.gov, which that link is in the chat for you to access. You create your federal student aid ID, also known as your FSA ID. If you are tuning in and you haven't started college yet, ideally you are starting this process during your senior year of high school. Once you have that ID available, starting October 1st, you can complete your FAFSA application. And the goal is to complete that form as soon as possible. The sooner you do, the greater the chance that you will be awarded the free money, the needs-based aid if you qualify for it. And that's what we want, right? Like that's what everybody wants. Everybody's chomping at the bit for that. There's not an endless supply of grants, nor is there an endless supply of scholarships being offered at any of these levels, the federal, state, and institutional level. So it is best to apply as soon as possible for consideration. Think of it as like we're talking about buckets here. Here's another bucket metaphor. There's a big bucket of money at the federal level. And as students put in their application and that money starts to funnel out to the students who've applied and are, awarded or deserving of that aid based on criteria, like that bucket of aid continues to dwindle and lessen until there's not, there's no more of the free money left kind of thing. So get those applications in for FAFSA as soon as possible. All right, follow me on the screen here. So eventually, financial aid packages will become available for new and returning students in LionPath. We're at the point of the year where you've seen these, or you should have seen your financial aid package. If you haven't yet, you can see that on LionPath, and you have accepted scholarships, grants, the free money that's been offered to you, and maybe also loans if absolutely needed, which we'll talk more about these funding sources and why you might pick one or over the other kind of thing. That aid is going to be applied to your bill, and then from there, your only responsibility is to pay the bill and to maintain satisfactory academic progress, which is that yellow spot on this, circle chart that we have here. That satisfactory maintaining academic progress, we call it SAP, satisfactory academic progress. That is to say that you're getting good grades, you're passing all the classes that you take, you're finishing your degree in the allotted time, you are just generally being a very good student and being productive and progressing with your degree as expected. Each year, this cycle repeats that you're in school. So if you are a brand new first year, first semester student, you just started this cycle and you're going to repeat it year over year until you get to the point where you graduate, you off-ramp this cycle. And if you've borrowed any federal student loans, you enter into federal student loan repayment or private loan repayment if you have those, which we'll talk more about. One thing I want to stress here, because I meet with grad students, I actually just met with a bunch on Friday. And for some reason, graduate students think that they don't have to or can't engage in this federal student aid process anymore after they leave undergrad, and that is not the case. If you are a graduate student and you are eligible to apply for FAFSA, please do apply for FAFSA each and every year. We'll talk more about grad loans in brief. We'll talk about loans available to graduate students and how they are accessible via the FAFSA application. So please, I had to kindly remind my husband of that the very first year he was a graduate student. Like, yes, keep applying for FAFSA. It is helpful to do so. Okay. Whew. All right. That didn't feel totally quick, but that is the process in a nutshell. So let's continue on. Now that we're clear about the financial aid process, let's dive deeper into these funding sources that are available to students. Starting with the one I know that we're probably most curious about, it's going to be free money. So we'll zoom in on the ones that are circled, but I'm going to start with the middle bucket in green. We're going to look at free money first. Okay. So free money, love it. Who doesn't? This is money that does not need to be repaid. Okay. So we've got grants on one side and we've got scholarships on the other. Grants are awarded based on financial need, and there's always a limited supply of funding available. The same is generally true for scholarships, so they may be based on need or merit. And while not all scholarships require a FAFSA application on file, it is advisable to have your FAFSA completed and available for reviewers to peek at when they are looking at all the different applicants for a scholarship. It may make the difference in their awarding decision. So it's never a bad idea to have FAFSA completed, regardless of whether or not you get any grant money from the federal government or the state level government. Okay, so always, always, always just get FAFSA completed. That is like hopefully one of the big takeaways from today's session. Okay. So looking on the left side at grants, grants awarded by the U.S. Department of Ed include the FSEOG grant, the TEACH grant, and the Pell Grant, which is the most commonly awarded grant. It's typically only awarded to undergrad students who have exceptional financial need. So exceptional financial need, you'll get an indicator of that when you're looking at your SAI, that student aid index. And it is typically awarded to those undergrad students who have not yet earned a degree. So for students who are degree in progress, continuing to take their classes semester over semester, and you can see the current maximum award listed there on the screen, just over $7,000. Okay. The process to apply for federal grants is a bit easier to apply for scholarships because you're going to be considered for these grants when you submit FAFSA automatically. But scholarships are generally going to require you to submit a separate application. So it's important that when you're starting to look at those, that you're paying really close attention to the submission deadlines. You're looking to cast a pretty wide net when applying and looking at a couple of different sources that house scholarship information, which I'm going to give you a little bit more information about on the next screen here. So where do I apply for scholarships? Well, make sure you have FAFSA complete, and also take a look at what Penn State offers as well as what's offered externally. Something to note is that much of the scholarship awarding at the university is decentralized to the different academic colleges. So if you're a SMEAL student, you should be looking at SMEAL's website on scholarships to see what is available for you to apply to. If you're in nursing, or if you're in Belisario, or if you're in earth and mineral sciences, look at those different colleges or the different academic colleges websites to find the scholarship applications that are specific to you and your major of study. Okay. Also look at different department websites or talk with faculty who are in your department. They will have good insider knowledge on what is available, what scholarships are out there should you need, and can help direct you on how and where to apply for those. I know that in the College of Engineering, they have a really simple, like one-stop application shop where engineering students upload a profile about themselves, their academic profile. They continue to update it, and they will continue to be considered for scholarships on a rolling basis. Very, very easy to do. But if you don't make your profile, you're not going to be considered for scholarships if you're in that College of Engineering. So something to take advantage of here. Okay. And then with external scholarships, I had a couple of websites listed on the last slide. Fastweb.com, for example, is a great place to look to see a large amount. We're talking thousands of scholarships that you may be eligible for based on your academic profile, your profile from high school, some of the things that you have accomplished, your family background, where you've grown up, what you aspire to do with your degree or your time in college, things like that. So, I keep hearing like there's always money out there. Students just need to go and apply for it. And applying can be annoying or challenging or time consuming. And I have been there, done that. But if you try to reframe and think like, okay, I'm going to spend an hour every Sunday or 2 hours every Sunday applying for scholarships. If you get one and it's a $5,000 scholarship, well, gee whiz, I'd love to be paid $5,000 for 2 hours of my time. I mean, nobody's going to pay me that ever in life and, in my career. It's a great return on your time investment there. So try to think of it as like a part-time job while you are in college. Continue to apply for scholarships as they come up or as you feel like you need them to cover these college costs that you've identified earlier in the paying for college process. Okay. I'm going to pause really quick and just take a look at the chat and the Q&A because I think we've got some questions coming through here. So when can we account for scholarships? Can we use all the scholarships earned on a first semester bill? We'd like to use those for the first semester, then pay what's left for the second semester. We don't know how to connect all of those to the financial office. That is a good question, and I can't really say what you should do in that situation, but I can help direct you to folks who are going to have more information about the financial aid that's showing up on Lion Path as well as the billing. So those are two separate offices. That's going to be the financial aid office and then the bursar's office for billing. If you give me some time at the end of the session, I'm going to go ahead and send links to the contact information for those particular offices so you can try to get in contact with them. Okay. A separate question I saw, where would you create that profile for the College of Engineering? Great question. I will also send that link through at the end when I have a minute to pull it up. But if you Google Penn State College of Engineering scholarships, it should just take you to that page, which has a portal that you log into and a profile that you can then create for yourself. From what I've seen, it's pretty straightforward. Okay. All right. Onward. Oh, a screenshot. This should be helpful. So to reiterate what I was just talking about with FastWeb, these are screen grabs from FastWeb, and now I have a feeling this QR code won't work either. So hang tight. Let me see if I can get the FastWeb link for you as well at the end of the session. But to be clear, like when I say there's thousands of scholarships out there and you can drill down to ones that you are most eligible for, both as a undergrad and grad student, like here it is. This is giving you a sampling of that. Okay. If you do have questions, please continue to send them through in the chat. I will answer them as best I can as I move along or at the end. There's a lot of questions about scholarships. And I will say too, for graduate students, there are funding sources available, scholarships that exist, grants that exist, and other kind of free money opportunities that aren't necessarily available to undergrads, but it's worth exploring with your faculty advisor or somebody within your department or somebody on our team. I'll tell you more about how to get connected for one-on-one coaching, but we do want to make sure that regardless of the level you're at here in your education at Penn State, you understand all of the kind of funding avenues available to you. And that's way more than I can talk about in an hour. So I'm sorry that I can't dive too much deeper on grants and scholarships for now, but certainly there's always more that we could share in a one-on-one space where we talk specifically about your paying for college circumstance. Okay. So let's move on. Let's move on and talk about saved money. We've got personal savings and 529 plans to think about here. This is money that you as a student or your family member or some other benefactor has been setting aside for you before you came to college or during college that you are then going to tap into to pay for your college expenses. Okay, now free money is the best money. If you're getting grants and scholarships, that's the money that you should be certainly using first to pay for your bill when it becomes available. Next to that, we've got saved and earned money to utilize as well before we get to borrowed money at the end. So think about how you want to draw from these funding sources as the semesters and years roll by. And know that saved money, like scholarships and grants, is not endless unless you continue to fund your savings through you might have a benefactor or a family member, or as a student, you're working, which we'll talk about that in a minute, and you have an income from which you can save money. Okay. So when we talk about personal savings, my note to you here is build in these education costs into your monthly budget as a planned expense, and be planning in the long range. We're not just thinking about one semester at a time, but thinking about a 4-year paying for college budget and how that budget is going to remain as balanced as possible through working, earning income, and doing other things. Okay. If you're going at this with your family, create a spending plan early with your family. You've got, what do we have here? We've got Labor Day coming up. I don't know if anybody will go home for Labor Day, but certainly, come Thanksgiving, go back, chat with your family about your saving and spending plan for college expenses and how everybody's kind of involved in that or not, and making sure that you're clear. The left hand needs to know what the right hand is doing, kind of thing, so that you don't get to a start of a year or start of a semester and go, oh my gosh, I can't afford XYZ. I can't afford to pay my tuition. I can't afford to pay my rent for the next 3 months or whatever it may be. Those are really difficult situations to be in. And sometimes a conversation is all you need to have in order to prevent those crises from coming up in the first place, right? If you are saving money for college, one pro tip I'd like to offer to you is that there are different types of savings accounts out there that are going to give you a bigger bang for your buck, so to speak. So high yield savings accounts, certificates of deposit, Roth IRAs, progressively, money becoming a little less liquid in those accounts, a little less easy to access on short notice, but still a benefit to keep, some of your saved money for college in them potentially, because they're offering higher interest rates, higher APY. Basically, the bank is paying you more free money for keeping your money in that type of an account. And so what we see is, like, while we sleep at night, our savings account balance grows at a faster rate than like a standard savings account. A whole separate presentation we have on it. We do have a whole webinar recording on saving and investing that details that more for you, but I just want to plug that, like, everybody can be a choosy consumer, even students, and decide, like, well, maybe I would like to open up a high yield savings account to keep my summer work money in so that it's growing at a greater rate than it would be in my basic savings account that I originally had coming into college. Something to think about, right? And then on the 529 plan side of things, sometimes college students are not familiar with these, but they do have a family member who created this account for them when they were younger. These are education specific accounts with big tax advantages built in. If your family was putting money into this account, it was growing tax-free. They're taking out withdrawals tax-free, and essentially they're using that money for qualified education expenses like tuition, fees, books, things like that. So this money has been set aside and can be used only for really specific educational expenses. But because there is a tax benefit built in or tax advantages built in, people get really excited about them because they don't want to pay more tax to the government than they absolutely have to. So if you are a student that has a parent with a 529 plan for you, talk to them about it, learn about it, how it works, how they're utilizing it in this paying for college plan that you have. And if you are somebody who has a young child, or you are family planning right now and you're thinking about how you want to prepare for your child's future college costs, if they do end up deciding to go, investigating 529 plans can be very, very helpful. I'll go ahead and plug in for our PA residents here, the PA529.com website, where you can learn more about the 529 plans available here in PA. If I recall correctly, there are 2 types and they work a little different. So you're going to want to explore those and decide which might be best to open for my child, kind of thing. Anywho, the idea is, the takeaway from this slide is, the more you can save ahead of time, the less you'll need to borrow later, which, again, I keep saying we'll talk about loans in a minute, but we don't want to get there just yet, because that is like last resort paying for college. Free money first, saved money, earned money, all of that should take priority. So when we talk earned money, what are we talking about exactly? Well, we're talking about federal work study, which is something that's only going to be accessible to students through FAFSA if they qualify. And then there's other employment opportunities, regular wage payroll jobs on campus or off campus. There's assistantships both for undergrad and graduate students. There are waivers that exist out there potentially that students want to be mindful of as well. So on the federal work study side of things, For students to qualify for federal work study, they have to have demonstrated financial need, and they have to indicate on their FAFSA application that they'd like to be considered for federal work study. I was just talking with a student and a family about this last week. You're going to see if you're awarded federal work study on your Line Path financial aid award summary. But that money's not going to come to you as a student unless you actually go and get a job on campus. You have to work in exchange for that money. And this is where students sometimes goof in their first semester of college if they do have work study awarded to them, but they don't take the time to go out there and find a job on campus and actually work to earn it. Okay, so let's not forget to do that. That money's not going to come to you if you're not working on campus. And I can assure you there are plenty of places to work on campus. If you're not sure where or how to apply, check out the link that I just shared through the chat to the Penn State HR page. It's going to link you to Workday, which is your online job search and application portal here for Penn State. And you will be able to find jobs all across campus, working in dining, in recreation, working in various student serving offices on campus. My team is currently employing 13 student employees, most of them who've been with us since they were first year students going now into their senior year. So there are a lot of spaces where students can work, build skills that are transferable, and also maybe zoom in on a little bit of like what is most important to them academically or professionally. Like a lot of the students that work with us are aspiring, financial advisors. What better way to get some experience for financial advising in college than working for a personal financial wellness office where we do financial coaching and education kind of thing. So you can find a job that really tickles the itch that you have for learning or a particular content area or career field on campus. Okay, so that's federal work study in brief. Talking on the other side of things, like let's say you've applied for FAFSA, but you don't qualify for federal work study, don't sweat it. You can still work on campus. You could also work off campus if you wanted to. But I will plug and say that like your on-campus employers are going to be the most flexible when it comes to scheduling you and understanding that you're a student first. So like I never schedule my students to work during finals. I rarely have them work during the week before finals as well because they need time to study. Like I build in that flexibility because I'm in it with them here. I know what they're up to and what their school and work and personal life balance is like. And I support them being students first as well. You may not get as much flexibility working an off-campus job anywhere at any of the Commonwealth campuses. And that may make it difficult to keep that work school life balance or academic and work life balance balanced. You know what I mean? But take that for what you will. You have autonomy here and you can work where you want. And while doing so, you're earning a paycheck that you can then save and put away for future college expenses or use to continue to pay for college expenses that are actively occurring as you go along here. I will say for the grad students that we have in on the call, I think assistantships are becoming a little bit harder to find as the semesters roll along, but there certainly are some that exist out there, and you don't necessarily have to do a graduate assistantship that is directly within your program of study or within your academic college. You certainly can look around and find graduate assistantships that are outside of your research area, but still useful to you in that you're, continuing to build skills and earning income and finding a way to reduce your college expenses as you go along. Okay. Lots of asterisks here. Eligibility varies for these types of opportunities. First come, first served, and to the best candidates, those apply will be considered and eventually offered for positions. So please make sure that as a college student who is looking for employment on campus or elsewhere, you've got your resume up to date and you're ready to apply in the same way that you had like all of your documents together and we're ready to apply for FAFSA. So always need to be organized to endeavor in these spaces. All right. All right. So Let's round out then with a conversation about borrowed money. Borrowed money as like a funding source to pay for college costs should be a last resort. And I'll tell you why right now. Like, it's money you're going to have to repay with interest. We'll show you those interest rates in just a minute. But you're essentially going to pay back more than you borrowed in most cases. Okay. And that makes college a little bit more expensive. You're paying for the privilege of borrowing the government's money or a private lender's money for the time being, with this promise to repay later, and they want something in exchange. So they'll charge you interest. They're going to get a little bit more money out of you. Okay. So with that said, my message to you is like, if you have made a college budget, if you figured out how much college is going to cost you, and you're thinking about how your lifestyle choices are impacting that bottom line and whether college is going to be a little bit more expensive or a little less expensive, that is going to lead you to then deciding, do I need to borrow federal student loans or private student loans in order to get the bill covered and continue in my program? It is not necessarily wrong or bad to borrow loans if you absolutely need them. Okay. The idea is that like you will repay them in the future and you'll get a good return on that investment because the degree in exchange is giving you lots of opportunities down the road, right? But I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that we have a $1.6 trillion student loan crisis in this country. And with that in mind, it's really important that you as students or family members of students are being really thoughtful about whether or not to tap into this funding source to pay for school. If at all, if even at all, right? And considering these other funding sources first before getting to this point. All right. Federal and private student loans, they're different. You can kind of see the line up here across the screen. We tend to see federal student loans issued at a lower interest rate, so they're cheaper to borrow. They don't require a credit check when accessed via the FAFSA application. So there's no credit check involved, making them easy to access for first year college students, second year college students who don't have a credit score, or anybody who really doesn't have a good credit score or any credit score. So there's not a ton of obstacles to accessing these, and can be made available for loan forgiveness or income-driven repayment plans. At least that has been the status quo for a while. Okay, so there's built-in borrower benefits with the federal student loans. Private lenders don't have those same kind of benefits. And so because they tend to be more expensive, they require credit checks, they don't typically offer, income-driven repayment options or forgiveness programs. We recommend starting with federal student loans first. And from there, nobody at Penn State is ever going to recommend a lender to a family or to a student. But the reality is that you may need to, as a student or a family member, borrow in private loans to get the bill covered at some point. So being mindful of the two types that exist is important. And then when to tap into one versus the other is also an important consideration as well. Okay. So what does this look like on Lion Path? Well, if you, both undergrad and grad students, are applying for FAFSA, you're going to see federal loans pop up in your financial aid award summary. So everybody who fills out FAFSA is going to be awarded, or offered rather, a federal student loan. You do not need to accept all of it. You can accept part of it. You can accept none of it if you'd like to. The choice is yours, but please know that you do have a choice, and it's going to appear there, and you will have to make a decision about whether to accept some part, all of it, or none of the loan that's been extended to you. Okay, so let's zoom in and even further and know that, like, again, if you accept a loan that's been offered to you, these are the interest rates that you will be charged, in addition to some fees to get the loan, and then keep the loan, use it, pay for your college expenses, and then repay it over time. Okay, so it's not free to borrow federal student loans. Undergrads are, given access to direct subsidized and unsubsidized, and grad students are given access to direct unsubsidized loans. So you can see those have lower interest rates. And then, parents at some, if you needed a Parent Plus loan, you have that as a potential funding source available to you through a separate application, but you'll see there's a slightly higher interest rate attached to that. So more of the benefits built in for the younger borrowers who are going through this. Okay. Now, how much can I borrow is a question that comes up a lot. And we've got a whole nother webinar in 2 weeks on student loans specifically. So we'll dive even deeper on this, but I do just want to I think drive home on this slide that in general, federal student loans are not going to cover the cost of attendance for a student at really most any university, okay? There's a limit that a student can borrow year over year. So all of my first year students who are listening in right now, you can borrow up to $5,500 as a dependent student this first year of school. I can guarantee you that your tuition bill, well, I guess I can't guarantee. I know that your tuition is higher than that. I don't know what your bill is, but in most cases, this is not enough to cover college costs, which is why we say go to the free money, the saved, the earned money first. Use that to pay for your college expenses. And then if you need to borrow to cover remaining costs, you've got access to federal student loans. But even this might not go far enough, which is why I mentioned private loans as well as something to consider as a paying for college funding source. Okay. Now, one thing to note, and this gets a little in the weeds, we'll talk more about it in 2 weeks, but if you are a parent who has applied for a Parent Plus loan to try and help your student pay for school, but you're denied that application, your student will get bumped into independent student status, which you see has a higher offering, a higher amount of loans being offered to that student to help cover the costs. It's not an endless source of funding, nor should it be. I mean, that's part of why we have a crisis today. Not part of why we have a crisis, but because we have a crisis today, we should not be, just endlessly giving out loans to students because it's not always affordable, and being shackled to something like student loan debt is really an obstacle to financial wellness in many ways. So we want to be careful about how much is being offered. But you can see here that it's not endless. And so this is not going to be your plan A, I'm going to get my cost of college covered through federal loans and that's it. I'm good to go. Nope. Last resort. And it has a limited amount in terms of resources, to cover college costs, depending on what your remaining tuition bill is. So keep all of that in mind. There's a lot to consider as you're figuring out how you're going to pay for the bills as they come up each year and each semester. Okay. I'll round out with some more cost saving tips. You're probably looking at the screen going, oh my gosh, that's a lot of information. I want more of the free money. I want to reduce the cost of college. I don't want to have to borrow student loans. Just recap this for me and tell me what to do, Sarah, right? So you're applying for FAFSA year over year. You're taking advantage of the free money first. If you can, you're working while you're in school or during the summer to save up money or use that active income to pay for college expenses. And you're looking at, from an educational perspective, well, maybe I can graduate early and save myself a couple thousands of dollars because I'm leaving a semester early or a whole year early. At minimum, graduate on time so that you're not paying more towards your program and your degree than you originally intended. To do this, it's really helpful to meet with your academic advisor and plan for your major of study. And this is also true for graduate students, especially those who are trying to get any kind of minors or additional certifications as you go through your master's or your terminal degree. You still want to meet with somebody to talk through what courses do I need to take? Are there any prerequisites that are only offered once a semester, or once a year? And if I miss it, I'm going to delay graduating, or I'm going to delay my program of study. Nobody wants that to happen. If you can, take more than 12 credits per semester, because anything, after that 12 credits, and I think up to, I'm not going to say there's a limit, there's a top end limit, but those extra credits are included in the base 12 credit costs. Okay. So it's kind of buy 12 credits, get 3 more for free kind of thing. And that's a great way to fast track your graduation and also take more classes and not pay for more of those classes, right? If you can take summer classes, if it makes sense to do so, you might even decide to take some summer classes at a community college local to home. So long as you know that those credits are going to transfer, that could be a cost-effective way to continue progressing in your program. And like I mentioned, watch for those prereqs because you do not want to miss them if they're only offered on a yearly basis. That could, and I've seen it, I've seen students delay graduation by a whole year because they missed a prereq class that they need to take before another. And it just throws everything out of whack. Now, creating that college, paying for college plan, the financial plan, you got to put all of this together. It's a lot. I totally recognize it. This is a lot of information and there's a lot of moving parts and there may be a lot of hands in on this. So if you are not just going at this alone, you have a family member or a couple of family members, you maybe have a parent and a grandparent plus yourself trying to get all this paid for. There's a lot to communicate with a lot of people. It behooves you to have those conversations and to create not just a semesterly plan or an annual plan for paying for college, but a 4-year or 5-year or 3-year plan, whatever it may be as well. Forecast and map out these expenses as far as you can and think about what you're going to do during all this time that you're here. Are you going to travel abroad? Do you want to do an integrated master's program? Changes like that academically are going to change your costs of college. In some cases, it may even save you money depending on what type of study abroad program you take. And if you're an in-state versus out-of-state student, there's some interesting things some levers to pull there that some students aren't familiar with, right? But talk with all of the knowledgeable people to get as much information as you can. My team, the financial aid office, the bursar's office, people at Penn State Global for study abroad, like get your ducks in a row and then consider all these financial sources that you'll use to pay for school, the free ones first, right? Be thinking about how much in student loan debt you may need to borrow over the course of your program. The rule of thumb is to, borrow only as much as your future salary will, can allow you to repay. And that takes thinking about, what do I want to do after I graduate, doing some research on earning potential with that degree, a little bit more research involved there. We can help with that. But knowing what you're going to be walking out with potentially is going to give you some insight on how to maybe navigate the day-to-day semester decisions you make academically outside of tuition, right? There it is. Research the starting salaries and consider those career goals. Okay. Whew, 12:59. So much information here. What I will say is if your head is spinning and you still feel like you need assistance, guidance, answers to questions, your best bet is to get connected with some of the resources on campus that can answer them. My team is like step 2 after financial aid. So we're not the financial aid office nor the bursar's office, but we certainly can be helpful when it comes to figuring out a budget to pay for college and helping to forecast those expenses over the next coming years and thinking about that, not in a vacuum, but like then paying off any borrowed money once you hit your career full time. Like we can help in that space 100%. If you are a student, make sure you get to Starfish. That's that green QR code on the screen where you can connect with us in one-on-one appointments. If you've got questions about financial aid, connect with the financial aid office. If you've got questions about billing, connect with the bursar's office as well. They're going to have the best answers to your questions, better than my team would have.